Okay, so we're going from data to our final speaker, Justin Lessler. I'm a big fan of these scenario modeling hubs, so we look forward to hearing about this and the future, right?
Yeah, so we'll talk a bit about the past, a bit about the future, and I'll wait for while I'm waiting for my slides to come up here, I'd say, I think we're, excuse me, looking at the presentations we've had so far. I think we're a little bit of fish out of water here, not only because I am here in person, but because this is, I think, a project that's a little bit further along its maturity cycle and also a little bit more focused on the United States. But I hope that as I go through, it can provide some frameworks and some inspiration for things that can have a much more global impact. And I'd say that our work has already been sort of copied elsewhere. This is also, I should say, that Cecile Verboud was actually originally asked to present, but I'm here in person, so we decided I'd do it. But she's very much helped develop these slides. And I'll thank up front the many, many people who've contributed to the Scenario Modeling Hub. We will thank again at the end. So before I get started on talking about the hub itself, maybe I should just give some context about our motivation. So why scenario modeling? And I think there's a couple of reasons, but one of the big reasons is that we just can't forecast that far in the future. Just like a weather forecast, we can't really give you a reliable weather forecast more than, say, 14 days into the future. At most, we can't really project a infectious disease, and it's going to depend on disease, but the course of infectious disease more than, a few weeks into the future. And beyond that, we get into the realm of projections, and we may actually want these projections to be conditional on decisions we make, because that's one of the biggest reasons we can't project so far forward. Just like, the weather, it's going to do what it's going to do, but our decisions fundamentally change the course of infectious disease outbreaks, which really means we have to be thinking about scenarios when we go far in the future. But we can't just punt on this, because the planning timeline, the timeline at which we make decisions that are essential to how we respond to infectious diseases, are much longer than weeks. This has no significance beyond being the first non-national result I got when I searched budget cycle in Google, and it's about a year long, and so financial decisions, this allocation decisions are being made today are what matter in a year. So we need some way to go out into the future. So that's why we need scenario models that can project out further under assumptions and be relevant to our decisions. But why do we need a hub? So one reason we need a hub is we need to compare apples to apples in modeling. And this really struck me early in the pandemic, where we had what I liked to call the choose your own adventure phase of pandemic modeling, where you had a bunch of different people, like here's my IGME model, here's one of our models, this is like UT Austin, and they were projecting very different futures about where the pandemic would go. And these, though, all had very different assumptions about the ways people would react. So we weren't seeing differences in scientific uncertainty. We weren't seeing necessarily differences in how the disease would progress because of our understanding of what was going on. We were seeing differences in assumptions about what people would do. And this wasn't always evidenced, which led people to sort of pick the model they liked for the whatever policy thing they wanted to argue, and also didn't allow us to distill where scientific uncertainty actually existed, where there was real uncertainty about the future. The other reason is to harness the power of the ensemble. This is one of my favorite quotes: ridiculously overconfident and wildly unreliable. This is not about infectious disease modeling. This is about weather modeling in the pre-ensemble era. When we see a projection like this for Hurricane Helene, which North Carolina, fortunately not my part, got hammered by just this last week. We see these cones that we know are like fairly accurate in terms of projecting where a hurricane or weather event will go. We've come to trust these, but these are not based on single models. These are actually the result of an ensemble of a whole host of different models that are projecting different things. And some, like this green model over here, say it's going to switch off to the west, and some say it's going to go up more, and then we go with the sort of projection that is best supported by most of the ensemble, and that tends to be accurate. But the green one might be wrong this time, but it might be right next time, and we really need the ensemble because we don't know who's going to be right when. And also, we don't know who's going to be right about what. So look at this blue trajectory. It over here on the course of the hurricane, it's not very accurate, but it was one of the few models that showed that the hurricane would get the category 4, which it did. So that ensembling is essential. And this is what actually happened. But, early in the COVID-19 pandemic, the Forecast Hub, which was a big inspiration to the COVID-19 Scenario Modeling Hub, was formed. And you can see the same thing here. Like, this is all the projections in the Forecast Hub. And people have looked at this, and you can rightfully think that they might say, oh my gosh, this is a mess. Modeling is useless. Nobody's telling us the same thing. And, you look what happened, and you're like, oh, how would you have ever gotten that out of this? But if we look at the ensemble of all of those forecasts, it was very accurate. It was pretty accurate and pretty informative. So, inspired by all of these issues, back in December 2020, we established the U.S. Scenario Modeling Hub to deliver multi-model scenario projections of COVID-19 at national and state levels. And over the time, we've had close connections with policymaking like ACIP, the White House, CDC. We've done 25 rounds of operational and respiratory virus projections. Most of those, 18, have been COVID-19, but we've also done rounds on influenza and RSV. And we've started to put and combine those projections together. And we're currently working on research rounds for disparities, looking at cryptic phase of the pandemic to try to drive forward the science of actually doing this, including how we evaluate the models. So now I'll talk very briefly, or very quickly, maybe not briefly, about the various COVID-19 or various scenario modeling hub efforts that we have done in the past. So the COVID-19 Scenario Modeling Hub is our first and longest running member of the Scenario Modeling Hub family. It started out projecting cases and hospitalization and deaths, usually around 6 months into the future, though we've had shorter and further. To date, we've completed 18 rounds, 15 of which have been public, 3 of which have been sort of training rounds. Actually, 16 of which have been public, 2 of which have been training rounds that we had internally, and we do 5 to 10 submissions per round. Get 5 to 10 submissions